Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. I have only met my guest for this episode a few moments ago, but just as I'm preparing to do this episode, I am totally dazzled by the resume of Mickie Kennedy, who is the founder of eReleases, and that is already impressive, and that's only scratching the surface because he also holds an MFA in creative writing, among other things, and I love the one blurb on the eReleases website about his creative writing experience. Actually, it says Mickey's professionally trained to write poetry. I'll kind of cut to the chase a little bit. Uh, he holds an MFA in creative writing, emphasis in poetry from George Mason University. And you have my envy because one of the many things I wanted to do with my life is write poetry and just write in general. But the sentence that really gets me and confirms that I know this guy is a heck of a writer. It means Mickie can stand his own against Emily Dickinson in MMA cage fight if it was less of a cage and more of a library table with a pad of paper between them. That is just money in the bank, beautiful creative writing. I could say like so much more to introduce you, but welcome Mickie Kennedy, president and founder of eReleases. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. And of course, I love the glasses. The glasses are money in the bank. And just everything that I'm seeing here is just money in the bank to not just keep using the same expression, which I don't think you would do that because you're just super creative. So, as a lot of people know, this show is about the forks in the road and the journey. I love the journey of entrepreneurs, and to get to where you are, I mean, you have quite a journey, and I know that started, oddly enough, with a degree in anthropology, and I'd be curious to know when your passion for anthropology began and how you wound up as a major.
So I grew up in rural North Carolina, and outside of National Geographic, I didn't know a lot about other places, and so I took some anthropology classes while in an undergrad, and just really loved it, and just started taking more and more, learning about different cultures. Everything from Central and South America to the Inuits and just Papua New Guinea. It was fascinating, and I just really enjoyed learning a lot about different cultures and different ways in which people live, and all the different traditions that we have in different places.
You know, I remember taking one anthropology class, and I'm going back probably about 21 years, I think now. But I remember anthropology being challenging. So I really respect the fact that you not only had the curiosity, but you tackled and followed through on something that I personally found a little challenging to study. So that's really cool that you did that. And just the curiosity there is really neat. And I really have to ask, so you're a brilliant writer just from what I can see, and I know it says BA English Anthropology, but then you wound up getting a master's in writing. Did you know that you had passion for writing? Did you know you were good at it before? How did you wind up deciding to go back for that?
So I was always a writer ever since I was a kid. I always assumed I would write novels and stories, but I'll tell you, I have bad ADHD, and I find that short is better. And so I sort of fell into poetry as an undergraduate and wrote and really enjoyed other poets. And then I started exploring contemporary poetry and writers that were writing today, and learned that many of them were at MFA programs, which were kind of new at the time. There was a few, but not as many as there are today. And so I decided that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work on my poetry craft, and I did that. It was a 3-year program, and I was just fascinated by it. It was just really a wonderful time to be able to focus on your writing, hang out with other people, and read a lot. And so I don't know whether it prepared me, career wise or not, but I kind of think it did. It helped, sharpen my creative skills, my writing, my ability to use imagery and tell a story. So I think that that helped me with my PR background as well.
Well, you must have less ADHD than I do because there was a time in my life where I really wanted to become a writer and flirted with the idea of journalism and really like actually to probably the direction that you might have wanted to go in, actually really writing something like long form. And I just could never get disciplined enough. I mean, writing for as good as I think I am at the English language and actually writing and whatnot, it's hard. Like, for as many Mark Schmidts as there are, there's probably a whole lot more people way better and actually have the discipline, i.e., somebody like you who actually really took it somewhere. But it's hard to really just sit down and have the right mindset.
Yeah, it does take a bit of practice, and it is something that you have to make room for. As a matter of fact, after I graduated with my MFA degree, I didn't really write for 20 some years. I took a break and I got started back in it probably about 5 or 6 years ago. But yeah, I took 20 years off just to focus on my business, and I definitely missed it. And I was so pleased to take it back up around 5 or 6 years ago.
No, that's awesome. I mean, it's something even as somebody who's never published anything or really used my writing other than for at work, I use it, I guess, to my advantage, but I've never really like I know poetry and really admire any skill with poetry because the best that I've ever been able to come up with is back in the day going in AOL chat rooms and saying, you know, trying to write something romantic like, I'm walking through a gooey meadow and then nobody responds. Or maybe one person will be like, oh, that's so romantic. No, it's not. That's terrible. Even my wife tells me that's terrible line. So that's about as like I have a lot of respect for the fact that you really took it somewhere and you're obviously using that skill and have used that skill with e-releases and with all these things that you have majored in and specialized in. How did you make the transition from thinking about all of those things and shifting gears to e-releases? How did that become a reality?
I think for me, I was going to wait tables and write poetry after I got my Master's of Fine Arts in creative writing. And what I discovered was I did that for a summer after I graduated. And I will be honest, my knees hurt, my back hurt, and I just felt so zapped psychologically, at the end of these long shifts that I wasn't getting anything done. And so I decided I needed a safe office job. And so I applied to several places and got hired at a telecom research firm as employee number three. And because I had a writing background, they wanted me to write press releases. And so I wrote press releases and sent them out via fax. So that's how long ago it was. And not much happened. But then I started focusing on uh, looking at what journalists were doing, what that the articles that they wrote were like, and I realized they really liked a story. And so as a result of that, I started taking the press releases that we were sending out, which were mostly a lot of data, and talking about the anomalies from the data and the story behind that. For example, I remember at the time that we were publishing some telecom traffic statistics from the US to several Caribbean countries. And there was one, I can't recall at the moment, that had way more traffic to and from the United States than all the other countries. And the reason for it was it turned out that it was the center for 1-900 numbers at the time. Call centers were set up there, and they were very popular for, 75 cents a minute, get your horoscope, or $2 or $3 a minute. You could speak to an expert. On dog care or things along those lines. There was also dating and other things, party lines and stuff that for 1-900 numbers. And so I put together that as a press release and sent it out. And boom, we got picked up by the Financial Times, The Economist, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and three telecom trade publications. And so I realized that that was what the media was looking for. So I did some other releases, a similar vein, and we got lots of pickup from those as well. So it wasn't just a one hit wonder. It was something that we could replicate again and again. And so I was fascinated by that, and I really just wanted uh, others to realize what a strong uh, you know sort of asset it could be to invest in the media and build this credibility and get this media pickup, because you get new customers, leads, but then you take these articles, you share it with your existing customers and your leads, and it excites them and it makes them feel like they're working with the right company. And if they are a lead, they're more likely to convert after reading these articles, because they just really feel like you're doing something that's extremely important, and it makes you stand out as an authority and have some leadership in your industry and marketplace.
And I feel like to be an entrepreneur in a lot of ways, you almost have to like answer a question or solve a problem for people. And I
Mhm.
feel like you're solving a problem and answering a question for a lot of people, because this is, I certainly don't have a gift for writing press releases. I never even thought about doing that in my entire life. And one thing I think you should do is actually define what a press release is. I think you did a little bit in the
Sure.
last bit, but let's break it down. Let's define it.
Sure. So basically, a press release is an announcement to the media. Hopefully, it's one that you think is newsworthy. It has a title, um, opening paragraph. It's usually between 400 to 600 words. There's usually a media contact, and it's usually written in the third person. You might have some language in the first person, but it's usually within a quote. And so it's like, Microsoft launches new software platform, to focusing on accountants or something like that, and then it describes what it is, and you're really trying to put the most important information at the top as sort of like an inverted pyramid, and you're really just trying to take what is important to you and announce it to the media, ideally in a way that they're going to be energized and want to share it with their audience. Journalists are looking for stories that either entertain or educate their audience, and ideally, some stories that do a little bit of both. So, don't always look at what is important to you. Like we've released a new product, we want to sell a lot, so therefore this is important to us. What could you put in that press release to make it important for the journalist? And sometimes it's a matter of you know, showing the stakes of why your solution is so important. For example, let's say in your industry, 67% of new businesses fail in the first 5 years. So if you have a product or software solution, you could sort of say, hey, 67% of businesses in our industry fail within the first 5 years. That's why it's so important to get a handle on your cost. And that's where our logistics software solution can really help. And then put a case study in there. Now, I mentioned before having a story arc. Journalists write in a story. So incorporate story arcs, and a use case study is a really good way to do that. So all of a sudden share someone who beta tested your product, what their results were, maybe even have a great quote by them. And so now you have a lot more elements for journalists to build out a story arc. And so, always sort of look back at what you're wanting to announce and really try to reverse engineer it with the journalist in mind, trying to make it more having elements of a story, and also maybe get some stakes in there, some data points that really show the importance of this product or solution.
I feel like you've taken something that some could look at as, okay, it's information, and you've turned it into like a real art. When did it click in your head that, hey, this can be bigger than just being informational? I can turn this into a story. This can be like artistic.
I don't know. I think that coming out of a poetry program made me think more of the writing in a story arc, and just paying attention to journalism and articles made me sort of look at what people were writing, and I saw so many people really trying to write in a story arc, even if it's a small little piece. They do like to try to tell a story because it really definitely, I think, resonates with a lot of people.
What makes for a good storyteller? What do you think about when you're trying to write a story or a press release?
I think that you know, you look at natural milestones in a business, and then you try to say, how can I make those important, newsworthy for the media? New products and services are definitely important. There's also if you won an award within your industry or you're speaking at an event, those can also be. But also look at combining additional things within the press release that might make people more likely to engage with you. For example, so many people who appear on Shark Tank often will introduce their personal story, and sometimes it's an obstacle that they overcame, like they lost a spouse and they had a hobby and they wondered if they could turn it into a business. If not, they often share, I was, getting in college and I met my best friend, and it's just a very entertaining story. And I think the reason that so many people on that show do that is because it's a really great way to immediately identify with them. It gives you this emotional response, this human interest element where you have immediate empathy. And so, are there opportunities for sharing your story? And maybe that's not the focus of the press release, but I said it's the most important information going down. And there's usually a boilerplate at the bottom. We recognize it as saying about, it's usually about the person or about the company. And, Microsoft will have a little section at the bottom that says about Microsoft, and it'll be like their elevator pitch, something that they just recycle and use again and again, that just very succinctly in 2 or 3 sentences says what Microsoft is about. And that's a place where you could maybe incorporate some elements of an interesting story that you have, and make it more likely that when someone reads that, they'll really identify with you and feel for you and get that empathy, because that really is important. And I think that a lot of people feel that business press releases should be all completely professional. I know a lot of small businesses that make up people. They'll make up a press contact because it's just them and their business, and they don't want to list themselves. And I'm like, the media doesn't care. As a matter of fact, the media will often seek out unknown companies, which are usually small businesses, little startups, because they know that their audience really wants to be exposed to new and interesting things and see the journalist as a curator. And so, if the journalist is always talking about the Googles and the Apples and the Microsofts of the world, they don't get a lot of accolades and appreciation from their audience because everybody pretty much knows them. And all of those companies do enough advertising that at the end of the day, there's very little that they have that's new that we sort of don't know about. But if there's a new product or solution or software that the journalist is talking about, and it's from a new company, and even if it's a one-person company, people appreciate it because generally they didn't know about it to begin with until that journalist put the spotlight on it. And for that reason, being really small is an advantage with the media, and don't feel that you have to hide yourself and appear to be, more professional and a bigger corporation than you really are, because it's completely appropriate to be a one-man show and list yourself as the media contact. I don't think it's going to hurt you any bit as far as getting media attention.
I think that is really amazing advice. I mean, just because you're a small company, don't minimize where you are. Like everybody has to start somewhere. I mean, look at how I got started. Got started with a microphone, a Zoom, a lamp. I mean, I have very basic setup here and have pretty much maintained that. But I could probably make it even more elaborate. I haven't worked in all that in the budget. I'm getting a little off track here, but I guess my point being is that I myself, being like a smaller podcast at this point, I'm not ashamed to just say I'm the only one behind this. I am the go-to. You need to reach somebody for this show. I am the one that you reach out to. And you just have to have, I think, that mindset of, hey, you gotta start somewhere. This is how we start. And you just use your resources and build. And you know, I think it's great that you're really focusing on the smaller brands and thinking about them, because that's hugely important in a world where a lot of the focus is on bigger brands and I guess the bigger grand scheme of things in the media. So we need people like you.
Thank you.
And yeah, I guess my segue from there is to really kind of talk about the actual startup of eReleases while we're talking about getting started and gaining momentum. And we're going back to like 1999, late 90s. So back then, I certainly wasn't thinking about being an entrepreneur, and I think a whole lot less people were thinking about it as well. What was the process for you, and how did you just get yourself going, get the confidence, get the strategy for what you were going to do? It's a lot of questions all at the same time. I'll let it at that.
So I think for me, I had worked for the telecom company, and I had the idea for emailing journalists because at the time I was faxing, and all of a sudden I started getting a lot more calls with journalists excited saying, "Hey, could you email me these releases in the future?" And so I did, and it was made me think, oh, I can get a lot of journalists' emails by asking them and ask if I could send them releases. And so I did. I spent about a year just networking with journalists on message boards and websites and asking them if I could email them press releases in the future. And it took about a year, but I got 10,000 journalists who agreed. And so I just started the business as a matchmaker. I did it in the evenings, and um, eventually I reached a point that I felt comfortable enough that I could leave the telecom company and focus on just press releases. Over the years, PR Newswire reached out to us and said, "Hey, we like what you're doing. The people that you're servicing and the price points that you're offering." They're not something that would attract any of our salespeople. And maybe there was a way in which you could offer maybe a city or state distribution to all of your customers. And I really pushed back and said, "Hey, these guys deserve national media attention." And the Newswire charges over $1,600 to move a press release nationally over PR Newswire. And I was asking for that, and my customers were paying just like $300 at the time. And surprisingly, the Newswire kept coming back and trying to figure out how we could make it work. And I noticed, having visited them, that they talked about having an overnight editorial team that didn't do very much, but they had to be there in case there was breaking news, an accident, a recall. They needed to get some news out to Asian markets. And so I suggested that I take all of my releases and start scheduling them for next business day. And then that would give their overnight team the ability to work on them and set them up without it costing them additional labor. And so after that, they finally agreed to allow all of our releases to go out nationally. And today, every press release on eReleases goes out nationally over PR Newswire. It's the oldest and largest newswire for press releases. And again, what is a newswire? When it comes to press release newswires, there's basically two in the United States. It's a duopoly. It's Business Wire and PR Newswire. There's a lot of companies that have Newswire in their name and they say you can issue their release, and they do syndication where they put your press release on websites that no one reads and locations on websites no one sees, and they do other kinds of things, but they're not really a platform that reaches journalists. In the US, it's PR Newswire and Business Wire. The third one that tried to make a hold was Globe Newswire, and journalists are busy, they're under a lot of pressure, and to expect them to go to a third pond to fish for stories is too much of an ask. And so Globe Newswire pivoted and now focuses on largely publicly traded customers who are looking to meet SEC disclosures, and they really don't want journalists looking at their numbers too closely. So they're fine without reaching a lot of journalists. And so, all of our releases go out over the wire. And I'd mentioned that, there's two in the US that the journalists go to. They have access where they can look at a feed that is just the content that they're interested in. It could be just the industry feed, or they can sort of fine tune it by setting up keywords and exclusions so that the feed is really specific to them. And that makes the newswire so valuable to journalists and why journalists really love them. I mentioned that I got started with email. They do not like email anymore because what has happened in the last 25 years is media databases that people pay $5, $10, $20,000 a year to get access to. And when a golf club company pays $10,000 for a media database annually, and they see that there's only 2,400 journalists that cover golf products, they talk themselves into say, "Hey, let's send this to banking and business journalists because, hey, bankers and business people buy, they play golf clubs and they buy golf products." And the thing is, the journalists are the ones that cover business activities or banking activities. They don't cover golf clubs. Even though some of their audience might certainly play golf. And so as a result, most journalists, their inbox is just chaos. And there's so much off-targeted press releases and so much spam that even PR firms are having a difficult time getting their pitches to the journalists. And so they're having to pick up the phone. And, a lot of journalists don't like the phone calls, but they have to play it and say, hey, we sent you a pitch. Could you check that you got it? And they'll have to go find it and all the spam. So it's very difficult. And that's why the news wires are more important today than they've ever been. And, not just traditional media have access to the wire. There are people in the fashion world on Instagram who get access to the Newswire's feed and use that. I follow a guy on TikTok called the Snackalator who does a weekly roundup of fast food stuff and then also snacks that are hitting grocery store shelves. And he will, pull up the images and say, "Hey, I can't tell if this is a glaze or not because this is just the image from the press release I pulled off the wire. But I really look forward to seeing it when it comes out, and I'll let you know what I find out." And so, he's using press releases because it gives him instantaneous, right when the company launches the product, they release the press release, and it gives him early access to all of these things that he's then able to share with his audience. And so, media is evolving, and a lot of it is being usurped by social media, but that's okay because social media is getting these press releases and using that content as well.
And this was a big reason why I jumped at the opportunity to have you on my show, is because you're not just somebody who started their business over the past few years. You've been through like a whole generation of changes and lots of things going on, which are also known as changes. So, one thing that I do want to ask is that you're so good at what you do, and your personality is really on this business. But there had to come a point where you said, oh man, I gotta like expand, more people have to be working for me and with me. When did you make that decision? And is it hard for you to not be too micromanagey about everybody else's writing? Do you like mentor? Do you coach? How do you approach working, like
Sure.
having a staff?
So I hired my first employee, I think probably way too late. I was really, really, really scared that if I hired someone and then we had a bad month, what would I do? I mean, I'm not just responsible for myself, but I'm now responsible for someone else. So I made sure that there was a lot of money coming in regularly before I hired that first person. And it helped relieve things for me. And then slowly we started adding more staff, and I was a micromanager. I did not realize it. I am a perfectionist. I want everything to be perfect. I had no business and marketing skills, so years ago I joined a marketing mastermind with Perry Marshall. He was sort of known for AdWords at the time, but he was really brilliant in almost all aspects of running a business and building a business. And then you had like 15 other business professionals in other markets, and they were letting you know what was working with them, what tips and tricks, and you got to share your problems. And the recurring theme with me was my staff. I had really bad turnover. Most people only stayed a year. I was never happy with them. And finally, one of the people in the mastermind was an HR consultant. And she's like, I only work with large corporate clients, but I could probably figure out what's wrong with your business. I could interview your staff, interview your customers, and look at your job postings and figure out why you're bringing in the wrong people. And she came back and said, hey, you know, uh, I figured it out. Your customers love your staff. Your staff like their job, but they hate working for you because you never praise them. You always tell them what they could be doing better, and you're always being a perfectionist. And so, um, I tried to rehabilitate myself, but I knew like in one day that it wasn't going to work. I found myself when someone got off the phone coming up behind them and say, "Hey, next time," rather than say opening with the word no, say, while we don't offer a local only distribution, we do offer local saturation on top of our national distribution. And I said, it's just nice to not have to use the word no if you don't have to. And I just realized, oh, I can't help myself. So I gathered all the employees, and there was one employee that everybody looked to because she was a little bit older and had been there the longest. And so I just said, if you have any questions, report to her. If you have any questions for me, you know how to reach me by phone and email. But I'm going to go work from home and focus on the advertising and the strategy of the business and leave you to run the day-to-day operations. And I did that. And most everybody that was there at that time, which was April of 2015, they're still there today. And, now my interactions with the staff are they see me as the fun boss who pops in from time to time for book club or taking them out for meals, or we do a week at the beach every year. And I get to hang out with them, and, it's fun. It's not me, breathing down their neck and trying to drive them to be perfect. And what I realized is that not every employee is going to answer every question the way you would, and that's okay. As long as at the end of the day they are getting the information that's needed, to be sent to the customers, that they're able to discuss that and get that across. That's the important thing. And so I just realized that that's enough. I have a lot of education. As a matter of fact, the big thing I've been working on is trying to get my customers to do more strategic types of press releases. And I looked at all of my press releases that are successful and found patterns that you can replicate. And so I have a free masterclass at eReleases.com/plan, PLAN. And it's less than an hour long video, but it's very accessible for anybody, even someone who's just exploring PR as an option. Because if you focus on those types of releases and you do a PR campaign of 6 to 8 releases and they're strategic, it's pretty much a guarantee that at least a couple of those are going to get real earned media for you. And I take that same education and give it to my employees and let them go through it, so that they can better communicate that to the customers as well. And I find this works for me. I know that in some businesses you may not be able to get away from your staff. I don't know how I'd solve that and not be able to be a micromanager, because I just couldn't control myself with my staff. So, divorcing myself from the office and focusing on strategy and business has allowed me to basically triple the business since 2015. And, I don't think I could have done that if I was constantly looking at the staff rather than looking at the big picture and where we should be and how we should grow.
Do you think that removing yourself from the office has given you a little more balance and that has allowed you to see things that maybe you weren't seeing when you were there and in the trenches a little more?
Yeah, because I was constantly looking at the staff all day and figuring out, are they doing it perfectly? Are they doing it in my words? I wasn't sitting there thinking, hey, I wonder if there's a pattern between all these successful press releases. A lot of people say that press releases don't work. And I think the problem with that is that, yeah, for 97% of press releases, they probably don't generate earned media. It's competitive and it's hard. But if you look at 3% of press releases that are successful, you'll find lots of patterns in there. And I've done this with clients. If we take those patterns and have our clients use them, they will have successes. I have one type of press release that came out of that everybody who has incorporated it has always generated earned media. Usually, the least they've ever gotten is 4 articles, and an average is 8 to 14 articles. And it is a little involved. It's doing a survey or study within your industry. It really propels you as a thought leader because you're the person authoring the survey. and the results. But you basically create a survey in SurveyMonkey, 4 questions per page. I like 12 to 16 questions, and I like the 4 questions because it breaks it down easy. And if they stop in the process, you've still got their initial responses. And you want to ask questions that are really timely today, things that if you're like, hey, would you be curious what our industry right now feels about the chances of AI replacing their job? Yeah, I would like to know. Ask that question. And yeah, take that link to the survey. You do not need to know your industry contacts. Nobody probably knows hundreds and hundreds of people in their own industry. But you take that link, go to a small or independent trade association within your industry, and they are out there. Everybody knows the large trade associations. Stay away from them. They have their own media department. They want to run everything. They don't like to cooperate. But these smaller ones that do exist, look for one that has 500, 600 members or more. I was doing a podcast with somebody in the PR world, and she goes, "Well, Mickie, you have to admit that our industry is an exception. In our field, there's only Public Relations Society of America." And I looked at her and said, "There's 470 other trade associations for PR in the United States." And she didn't know it. And I said, "That's the problem. These people don't get a lot of media or attention. Some of them are very hyper focused and they're not a good fit, like, Texas PR professionals, but some that are like smaller or solo PR professionals might be a good fit because it's probably 80% of the PR market. And so, take that one, for example, approach that trade association and say, hey, here's a link to a survey that I'd like to conduct. I'm looking for at least 100 responses. Could you send this out to your members? And in exchange for that, I'll mention you in the press release I'll be issuing over PR Newswire. Again, these places aren't well known. They don't get media very often. So if you approach it like that, they'll see that as a win-win opportunity where they could get mentioned in the article as well. And so about 2/3 of the time, the first association you ask will say yes. Once they've sent it out, you've got enough responses. You analyze the results and figure out what was the biggest surprise. If you were to ask one question in the press release, what would people want to know the answer to that came out as a result of the survey? And focus the press release on that one, or perhaps a second question could be mentioned as well, but I like to focus on one. Take all the questions and answers, build it out on your website, add some more quotes on that page, make it a resource, because really great journalists will look at that page and see if there's opportunities for other articles they could be writing. And sometimes the question that you thought was the most important turns out wasn't. And a journalist who's smart and looks at the link and writes an article can get you to say, maybe I should do another release focusing on that angle of the survey. And like I said, most of the time when all of my customers do this, I've never had them fail. They've always got earned media, and the least they've ever gotten is 4 articles. And so, talk about, press releases not working. Here's one type of press release that works again and again. And if you handle it by a process, it's not overwhelming. It's not very difficult. And it's one of the ways to sort of stand out and be recognized in your industry because you authored this survey and you put an amazing quote in there of why you felt the numbers skewed a particular way because you're the expert now. You're the author of this data.
So you mentioned AI in that statement, and it made me think about the impact that it might be having in your field. And I'd be curious to know what you feel is the difference between having somebody like a person who is very creative and brilliant and is putting a human touch on press releases and why that's better than having AI, which is not most likely not going to put that same kind of touch on it.
Sure. So I think when it comes to AI, um, you know, I think that there's a place for it. Could you use it to write a press release? I played around with it, and yes, you can certainly get it to write a press release. If you want it to write a good press release, the worst thing you can ever do is say, write a press release on this subject matter. Uh, what I've done is I kind of abuse AI a little bit. I will go to it, and you have to go to it with a idea of what you want it to write about. And it has to be strategic because I said only strategic press releases work. So if you ever tell AI to write a press release or to give you ideas of press releases they could write for a particular company, it searched the internet and it's been trained on the internet. It's going to come back with 97% of the types of press releases that aren't effective. So go through that master class, work on those types of strategic ones, and take one of those strategic ideas and then go to ChatGPT and say, hey, how would you structure a press release on a survey in which uh, 62% of PR professionals felt that they were probably going to be replaced by AI within the next 5 years. And then it builds out a structure. It's really good at outlines and structures. It's really bad at just being given the go ahead to just write a press release because it won't write a press release with that great structure. So you then take the structure and say, okay, now write the first paragraph and, write the second paragraph. And then you're like, ooh, I don't like that second paragraph. Write the second paragraph and be sure to include XYZ. Boom. Okay, it's not great. Give me five different complete versions of paragraph two. Whoa, I really like the fourth one you did. So let me copy and paste that. So, in that third paragraph, make sure you have an amazing quote where I talk about XYZ. That's another place that it's really bad at. Quotes, it usually comes with are safe and not amazing. What do I mean by an amazing quote? It could be the way you worded it, your wordsmith. It sounds beautiful. It could just be something that you say that's so shocking or provocative, a contrarian viewpoint. But it can also be how strong you say it, how well you've condensed it. You're saying it with the least amount of words, and the brevity of it is so concise that if a journalist paraphrased it, it would lose that strength. And so a lot of times I go back and I rewrite the quotes myself. But you could play with it a little bit more. Headlines with press releases, you're not writing the headline for the customer. If you write a pun or a funny headline that like New York Post uses, which usually has no context, you will not be read by any journalist. Journalists are looking on a feed and they're looking for relevant press releases and stories. And if it's not apparent that that's relevant to their industry and it's not specific of what is going on, they're not going to click through and view it. That's an easy way to fail. And so, work on the best press release headlines are often the most boring, but again, they get all the details of what you're announcing, why, when, where, how, why, all of that, as much as that can be answered in the headline is important. And again, don't write, a headline for a consumer. Lean on the chat GPT, say, hey, give me 10 versions of a headline for this press release. Ooh, I really liked number five. Hey, I really like that number five, you included XYZ. Now give me 10 versions of that headline with that element in there. So really lean on it. And I find that if you do that, you can walk away with a pretty good press release written by AI. And the great thing is the press release is not the end product. I would always feel uncomfortable if the end product was going to live on your website. Like I would never have my blog posts written by AI. I just feel like Google is smart. They can tell when something's written by humans and when it's not. But when it comes to a press release, you're writing it as a shorthand and a message for journalists to turn into an article. As long as it doesn't turn off the journalist and all the elements are necessary for them to write a story, I don't have a problem with people leaning on AI, and I think it's completely okay. I know that for small businesses, it might just be too cost prohibitive to pay someone like eReleases to write a press release, $300. And I will admit that at the end of the day, press releases are not great writing. They are usually written at an eighth grade level. They're usually just very, top-down information. So I do think it's probably one of the few places where it's probably okay if you're not a great writer to lean on AI to help you write a press release. But again, ask it to build the structure, tell it what the press release is going to focus on, give it as much elements that are important. Make sure you go back and look for opportunities to put data in there. If I mentioned about the importance of showing the stakes of a product, like if there's a failure rate in your industry, maybe that could be it, or maybe there's other publicly available data that's out there that you could reincorporate back into the press release. Have an amazing quote, and really just look, are there more opportunities for me to build elements into this press release that would create give the journalist an opportunity to create more of a story arc. And I think that all of those can you can be done, and you can use AI. But again, I think you're going to have to be involved paragraph by paragraph, and you're really going to want to lean in. That being said, you know, I've been able to do them in 20, 25 minutes. And so it's not overwhelming, what I'm talking about. It really sounds like a lot, but, it's one of those things that you just have to play with and keep refining and getting better and getting more out of it.
Well, we've heard a lot of insight on what makes for a good press release. You ever pick one up and say, "Oh, that's not really a very good press release"? What do you what to you it makes for a bad one?
So I think that I used to think it was how perfectly well written the press release was. And I realize now that that's not as important anymore. It's really what you're announcing, that how newsworthy it is, how how you've positioned yourself, and are you saying something that the media wants to share with their audience. Journalists are largely gatekeepers, and you have to be able to break through that. And the secret is, all you have to do is make it a story that would be really compelling to their audience. And what could you add to it or build into that press release to make it more likely that they would want to share it with their audience? And press releases that often do not engage audiences are a new hire at your company. The big exception is you have a new president or executive, or you pulled in an industry veteran who retired 5 years ago, and everybody loved that person, and now they're coming in, to be a member of your business. That's important. I could see you doing a press release, but I would say probably 99% of the press releases we get for personnel changes are low-level people, like an associate in HR, and the media is not really interested in that. You could look for opportunities to try to, you know, build in more of a story, like what that person's path was. But you might have better luck just taking that person's headshot, a few sentences about them, and just sending it to the local paper, sending it to a couple of trade publications, ideally ones that have an on the move section where they do just that, put a little picture and a little bit of information about that person's hiring in a new company. And they often have an email address or a contact where you can do that easily. And maybe use a service like mine where it's on the newswire for really more important types of press releases that are likely to get media pickup.
Well, there are probably 100 billion other questions that I could ask. I could probably make this a 2 hour episode, but I am going to stick to my format and keep it within an hour. And I'll just ask, how can people find you? Not that we don't really know, but how can they find you? How can they find anything else you're doing that you might want to share? How can people who are listening, who are saying, wow, I should do a press release, how can we encourage them to reach out to you? How can they find you?
So the website is eReleases.com. All of our social medias in the lower right. I think it's a direct link to my LinkedIn that I do check. I have people who handles much of the other stuff. Um, Feel free to call or email or chat on our website with our staff, especially if you're new to PR or open to it or just considering it. We're there to answer your questions. We have no salespeople. The only people that answer chat or the phone are editors, and they're there to help you. So, if you're reluctant or don't know where to start, feel free to give us a call and just ask. If you have a press release that you've put together and maybe you use Chat GPT and you'd like to get another set of eyes on it, feel free to send it along to us, and we'll review it and get back to you, usually within 2 business days. Again, at no charge, whether you're a customer of ours or not. We're just about helping people, and we recognize that press releases can be really overwhelming, and we want to try to make it easy for a lot of people to understand and be able to utilize it.
Well, I certainly learned a lot from our chat here. I can admit that I have pretty limited knowledge of press releases and certainly what goes into them. And this was amazing. And I could sit here and ask you about your two feet and cats or Maryland. I lived in Maryland for quite a few years. I'm in Florida now, but we are out of time. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, busy life to chat with me. This was a real honor. And you were and still are Mickie Kennedy of eReleases, not just of, but he is the founder. I thank you for being here. I am Marc Schmidt. I my show is Mark My Words, and thanks for listening. Thank you, Mickie, for being here. And I will see you soon. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Marc Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.